Are you trying to write for your business and you're just kind of confused because people keep referring to things like CTAs and CTRs and all of these terms that you've never heard of, and you're like, I'm sorry, how am I supposed to write better when I don't even know what you're talking about? Today's video is just for you. I'm breaking down the 7 top copywriting terms you need to know. Oh hey, I'm Emily, a copywriter who is obsessed with helping you make more money with your words so you can work less, do more of what you love, and make a bigger impact using your words to make sales. And that's what I teach you here. I'm a professional copywriter who's sharing all of my best secrets and helping you make more money with your words. Whenever I tell people I'm a copywriter, I typically get some kind of response like, oh, so you do trademarks or patents, and people automatically think of copyright law. Not a lot of people know what a copywriter is. To be perfectly honest, I didn't even know what a copywriter was until I started doing this job. It's not a term that we hear a lot. So I want to clarify some of the most common terms you'll hear a lot of business owners throw around, especially if you're learning about email marketing, website copy, sales pages, any of those things you're going to use in your business. These common copywriting terms are going to be used that we just don't use in regular life, right? So I want to start with copy, and then I'll get into like the 7 terms I'm going to share with you today. But we're going to start with copy because a lot of times people don't even know what that is, right? Simply put, copy refers to the words that you use to sell. So any words that you write for your business in an email, in a sales page, on a website, on a landing page, any of that is considered copy. You'll notice I left out 2 kind of big things that a lot of business owners write, which are social media captions and blog posts. Those things are technically content. So if you want to really get specific and break it down, copy is all the sales stuff, and content is what builds that brand awareness and brand recognition and educates your audience. So things like social media and blog posts. Now, you could technically have a blog post that is directly selling something, and that would be more like copy. This is why I don't spend a lot of time getting super specific about which is which. What is important for you to know as a business owner, if you are outsourcing, if you are hiring someone, I would advise you not to hire someone who describes themselves as a content writer to write something like a sales page. So a content writer is going to mostly specialize in writing blog posts and writing social media captions. Those things are incredibly important, okay? If you've done any kind of social media marketing, you know how hard it can be to do that yourself. So content writers are amazing at those things. If someone bills themselves as a copywriter, that's going to be typically someone who's going to be doing more of the sales focused things. Hopefully they have specific skills. Copy is an art and a science. So it's not really creative writing. It really is like formula based, and we follow psychology, and there's a ton of research, and like there is a science aspect to it, which I think is pretty cool, with like a creative bent on it, right? Obviously, because we want it to be like fun and exciting and all those things. So copy, words that sell, content, things that like educate your audience, build your audience, build your brand recognition, all of those good things. A lot of copywriters will write content. So in my time as a copywriter, I have written social media captions, I have written blogs for clients. So it's pretty normal for the overlap. Copywriters specialize in things that sell, content writers specialize in things that educate and build your audience. Okay, so now that we know what copy is, let's get into the 7 most important copywriting terms you need to know as a business owner. All right, we're gonna start with headlines. Headlines can actually be used for a lot of different things, and so I think it's important to clarify. Typically when we're talking about a headline, we're talking about like the big text on your website or on a sales page, right? So when you first open it up, there's like usually bigger text. It usually has what we call an H1 tag on it. That's like an SEO behind the scenes thing, but it usually, your headline is like the first big thing that you say. We want to use our headlines to draw attention. The whole point of a headline is to get someone engaged and like ready and excited and willing to read the rest of whatever it is you've written. You will also hear people sometimes refer to subject lines in emails as headlines. I think that's a little confusing. It's pretty common, people will do it. So if you're writing an email, if you're asking for help for an email and they're like, oh, do you want a headline? They typically mean a subject line. And the other place we use headlines is with blogs. So that is the title of your blog. So on a website or a sales page, the headline is gonna be the first big like piece of text. It's usually pretty short, right? We don't want really long headlines, usually like a couple words, 1 sentence max. There may be a subheadline, so some other smaller words below it, but that headline is gonna be short, snappy, and really grab someone's attention. They might be referring to a headline as a subject line in an email, and then the other way we're going to use it is as the title of a blog post. Okay, second term we want to talk about is a CTA, also known as a call to action. This is one of the most important things you're going to have in an email, on a sales page, on your website, because it is what prompts your reader. They've read all the good stuff you've written, they're ready to take action, and this is what prompts them to take the action that you want them to do. Whether that's buying, joining, filling out a form, it doesn't matter what the action is. The call to action, or the CTA, is the little headline, a little, prompting text, and then an actual button. It could just be a button. It doesn't really matter. That's a call to action. Now, having really clear, engaging CTAs is one of the most important things you can do. And if you're like, I just learned what this term meant, how do I possibly write them? I actually have another video that you can check out that's all about how to write really great CTAs that get more clicks. Speaking of clicks, let's talk about click-through rate. So your click-through rate is also referred to as CTR. We love acronyms, I guess, I don't know. But your click-through rate is how many people click on the button or link that you provide. So if you send an email, you link out to something, you can usually check in your email service provider and see how many people clicked on that link. So measuring your CTR is going to tell you how many people took the action you wanted them to take in an email, on a sales page, on a website, like all over the place, right? CTR, click-through rate. Now, here's something for you to know. If you start measuring CTR and you're like, whoa, why are these numbers so low? Average CTR for an email, so when you send an email to your email list, the average click-through rate is 2.5%. So CTR is typically going to be a lot lower than, like, say, an open rate or like a visit rate, right? So like if you're measuring how many people go to a sales page, for every 100 people that go to your sales page, you may only have a handful of people that are clicking that link, clicking that call to action, and taking the action you want. That's totally normal. But knowing your CTR is really going to help you see the big picture and understand how many people not just are like going or learning or opening something, but are actually taking action and thinking about doing the thing that you're asking them to do. All right, let's talk about another fun acronym. USP stands for Unique Selling Proposition. If you ever work with a copywriter, with anyone in marketing, with anyone who sells, right, they're gonna talk about your USP. Essentially, your unique selling proposition is what sets you apart from everyone else who does the exact same thing that you do, right? There are thousands, I don't know, millions of people, who knows, that are copywriters out there, right? We all essentially do the same thing. However, every single copywriter has something about the way they write, the people they work with, their process, the way they format projects. There is always something that is very unique. One of my USPs is that I do project days. So instead of waiting like 6 weeks to have a sales page done, I literally will do it in one single day. I'm wildly fast at writing copy. It's one of my greatest strengths, and it's something I'm able to use to really help my clients. And that is part of my USP. It's what sets me apart, right? So when I'm talking about working with me instead of another copywriter, I often will be like, if you're in a bind, if you waited too long, or if you need this done quickly, I'm your girl. The next copywriting term I want to make sure you understand is called brand voice. You might also hear this referred to as like brand tone, brand personality, what's your vibe. All of those things are really summed up in your brand voice. Now, your brand voice is one of the most important things that you have to use when marketing your business, when making sales, when writing your own copy. So knowing your brand voice is like wildly important. And if you're like, I have no idea how to figure this out, I'm just learning about this term for the first time, I actually have a link in the description of this video that takes you to a free brand voice little exercise you can do where you can answer a few questions and very clearly identify your brand voice so you can start using it, which is magic for your marketing and for your messaging. So anyway, yeah, your brand voice is your personality, it's your tone, it's the way you communicate with your audience, it's the words you use, it's the vibe you create, right? Like, are you super laid back and chill? Are you really high energy and very upbeat and very go, 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 go? Are you super type A and measured and organized? All of those things work together to attract your ideal client, right? So they need to hear your voice and be able to understand how you are approaching what you do and how you work with people to be interested and excited about working with you. So that's why brand voice is so important. It's your whole vibe, it's your whole tone, it's how you communicate with your audience, and it actually can be kind of complicated. Sometimes people feel oh, that should be super innate or super natural, or oh, I shouldn't have to work on that, or it's going to be inauthentic. Not true. We're talking about your brand voice, right? Your voice as a person, who you are as just a person in your regular life, that comes pretty naturally. However, there is some refining that you do. You're not making up a fake voice. You're not becoming a person who you really aren't. But to have really good, like a really strong brand voice, you do have to put some thought and intention into it. And then the hard part is really using it consistently. That's a whole other video. We'll dive into that. But that's what brand voice is. All right, another term you might hear is called A/B testing. A/B testing is going to take you back to middle school science class. This is essentially where you keep everything the same except you change one thing. So you have the control. So maybe it's an email, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's a sales page. Everything stays the same and you change one variable. So you might change the subject line, right? So maybe you're going to send the same email. You're going to send half of your audience is going to get one email, half of your audience is going to get the other. The actual email itself, every single word is going to be the same. However, you're going to have two different subject lines. And that way you can test what your audience responds to. Sometimes people will change something on a sales page. Maybe it's the order in which things are presented. Maybe it's the headline you use. Now you cannot running two completely different sales pages isn't really that helpful because you're not going to know what it is that connected. So with A/B testing, the really important thing is to only test one variable at a time. But if you hear people talk about that, like, oh, we'll do A/B testing. Essentially what they mean is you have a control, you change one thing, you send half of people to one, half of people to the other, and then you measure and you see what do people respond to, what should I maybe be doing more of, what's working with my audience. It's a really easy way to get really valuable information on your audience and what they prefer. So that's A/B testing. All right, our last term for today is above the fold. This is actually kind of an outdated term. It refers back to when we used to have physical newspapers. Actually used to work for a newspaper, and my job, I was a copy editor for a city paper. When I was in college, that was my internship, and my job at the end of the night was to go down to the printing room. This makes me sound like I'm 100 years old. But I would go down to the printing room and I had to pick up the paper fresh, literally hot off the press. And actually scan the front page and make sure everything that was above the fold was there. And I had to edit the front page and just make sure from a copy standpoint, everything was correct. And so that's what you want to do with your website, right? When we talk about above the fold, we typically mean a sales page or a website. And we really should call it before the scroll. That's kind of the updated term that I just made up. But essentially it's what shows before you scroll down your website or scroll down a sales page. And so that's where your headline has to show. And often we want to have a button that they can click, a CTA. We want to have some kind of call to action above the fold as well. So if someone is oh, your problem is you don't have a call to action above the fold, or you need to have this above the fold. What they mean is on your website before you scroll down. One thing to note, really we're just explaining what these terms are, but I can't help myself. One important thing when it comes to paying attention to what is above the fold is that you look on a desktop and then also mobile. It's really important to have your mobile version of a sales page or website optimized so those things actually show up above the scroll on a phone the same way they will on a website, right? Now, obviously with different monitors, maybe more or less will show. Phones are different sizes, you cannot control all of it, but you can make sure that the key headline and a call to action button, if you have one, are both showing on mobile version and on a monitor, on a desktop. All right, that is the 7 important copywriting terms. I hope you learned something new. I hope you feel a little bit more empowered and now you're oh, great, I can go work on my brand voice because I understand what it is. I can go measure my click-through rate because now I know what it is. You can use these things to actually help you improve your own copy, improve your own messaging, make more sales. That's always the goal around here. If you have questions about these terms, or if there's another copywriting term that you've heard and you're what the heck is this? Drop it in the comments and I'll let you know.